Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you're watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today we're going to talk about the Zack Snyder cut of the Justice League. So the Snyder Cut is sort of a long-awaited director's cut of the Justice League. It has been released on HBO Max as an HBO Max original, and I think releasing it there has been a pretty brilliant move by Warner Brothers. This movie is 4 hours long, way too long to put in a theater. You're not going to sell enough tickets with it, and the original theatrical version was so poorly received and reviewed that this was likely not going to do well in the theaters anyway. But there's enough hunger out there for this director's cut to make it this really interesting project on HBO Max, get a lot of fanboys to sign up for HBO Max. Just brilliant business move off the bat. And then I also feel like I need to say, just to sort of frame my point of view, is that I grew up just in love with Batman. I love almost everything Batman. I love the old Adam West stuff. I love the Tim Burton ones. I love the Christian Bale ones. I love the cartoons. The animated series is brilliant. I really dig the character and I like a lot of things about it. Hated Justice League, and I'm not just jumping on the bandwagon with that. I watched it, wanted to like it, genuinely hated almost everything about it, and I have not had two f***s to rub together about this Snyder Cut. I think Zack Snyder's movies are beautiful, they're spectacular looking, but story-wise, if he's left to his own devices to tell his own story, they are a mess. I think story-wise, his best job in the director's chair has been 300, and that movie is almost a frame-by-frame retelling of Frank Miller's books, so he's not really telling his own story there. I'll stop hating on Zack Snyder because I am shocked and surprised at how wrong I was and how much better this is. Now, it's still the basic same story. There's these three mother boxes, and there's a big sort of monster, Steppenwolf, that wants to destroy the planet. Basic, simple, surface level stuff. Most of that is coming out of the fact that Warner Brothers was just racing to compete with Marvel. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was making money hand over fist with 2 and 3 movies coming out every single year. Warner Brothers wanted a piece of the pie, and they really rushed it. They didn't set up the universe the way that Marvel did, and it has failed colossally as a result. Now, one more bit of housekeeping before talking about everything that works and doesn't work in this director's cut of the Justice League is the fact that this production was just rife with problems, big public problems that a lot of people knew about. And then in the middle of production, more or less, Zack Snyder had to leave to deal with some major family issues, and they brought in Joss Whedon, who's most famous for having sort of launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the first Avengers movie, which business-wise sort of makes sense in the short term, but then Joss Whedon's coming into a project where he doesn't have the vision, and his sort of brightly colored Marvel vision that's kind of silly is competing with this dark, brooding Zack Snyder vision, and it literally resulted in a big mess of a movie. There are a lot of things in the Justice League, a lot, that don't make sense, and ultimately are just not entertaining. I mean, it really kind of fell flat on its face, considering they spent millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to create this thing. Now, they had already spent well over $100 million on all the stuff Zack Snyder had already shot. Then, supposedly, they just spent another $70 million to finish out this Zack Snyder vision. So first off, I'll say I think it's very cool that that was made, that we have this interesting dynamic with movies now. Not just because theaters are closed, but we've got these big platforms that are all competing, and it was the right breeding ground for a major director's cut like this to be made. So the fact that it even exists is cool to me. As a movie buff and just a nerd that loves movies, I love that a director like Zack Snyder was able to rework this thing and we're able to watch it at home on HBO Max. I think that's cool. So first off, a big problem that they fixed is a lot of the cheesy, corny humor that just did not work in Justice League has been fixed. It has either been removed, or there's even a moment where they're introducing Barry Allen, or at least when he's meeting Bruce Wayne for the first time, where he talks about not having a lot of friends. It was this silly, dry joke that just sort of hung there in the air forever in Justice League.
Like brunch. Like, what is brunch? You wait in line for an hour for essentially lunch. I mean, I don't know.
After Barry Allen went on forever about brunch, it's like one of the worst moments of the movie. They cut it down, they added some dramatic music to soften the humor, so there's a little tinge of humor, but it's taken down a little bit. Supposedly Zack Snyder never watched the Justice League, which I do find hard to believe, but I even would find harder to believe that he has not read or at least watched some of the videos that criticize the movie, because clearly some things that people have been bitching about with that movie, they were surgically fixed in this director's cut, which is not a problem, but I kind of call bullshit on the whole I never saw the movie thing. So with the humor fixed, the tone automatically sort of shifts back into the right balance. Then you add uber violence. This is a rated R version of the movie. There is blood when it's appropriate. That's kind of an issue I always have with superhero movies, but especially the DC ones, because they are so dark and so brooding and so sort of mature in their tone. And then there's no blood, there's this silliness that pops up in some of them. It just doesn't work. They're trying to do Marvel and Christopher Nolan at the same time, and it's just, quite honestly, a recipe for disaster. The Zack Snyder cut has the appropriate tone and the appropriate amount of violence and bloodshed, and it works. Now, another big thing that they fixed is the look of Steppenwolf. I've never really been in love with that villain as a character to begin with, but then the theatrical release of Justice League, it looked like the first concept drawing that they came up with. He clearly looks like he's CGI, but he's a humanoid, and some of the action sequences with him were just kind of clumsy and not very menacing. The new Steppenwolf, his suit looks sick. It was so wild, all the little metal pieces moving. I even had trouble looking at it sometimes because it was skeeving me out. His look looks less human, so he was more menacing and he was bigger and bulkier. There's the scene where he's fighting the Amazons, which I thought was one of the worst parts of the Justice League. It's now one of the better parts of the Snyder cut. There's arrows sticking out of him. He's grabbing horses by the reins and throwing them 3 at a time. There's blood. It works so much better than what they did with the original, which was essentially just trying to make this massive thing Zack Snyder had already shot, trying to make that work in a 2-hour format, which was never going to work, and then trying to make it more like Marvel, which again was never going to work because you're already starting off with, again, this sort of dark vision that's very, very different from Marvel. And possibly the biggest thing is that the characters are more fleshed out, especially the characters that don't have their own movie. So in the theatrical release of Justice League, you jump into the middle of Cyborg's story, and he really never, almost to 100% never has anything to do of any use in the movie. It's kind of ridiculous that he's there, he's just tacked on. In the director's cut, he is a very pivotal character. He has a lot more to do, and he's much more important and has this bigger scope. That serves the story. It works a lot better. I can say the same thing for Barry Allen or The Flash. He's less cheesy and corny. His introduction, where he sort of saves a girl, is this great moment in the movie. And then back to Steppenwolf, his character's more interesting because he's serving this higher power of this dark side character, and he's got this crazy conflicted thing going on too, where he's just trying to serve his master. Interesting stuff. I mean, it really is more stimulating and more interesting than anything in the theatrical release of the Justice League. That said, Zack Snyder has his own head way too far up his own ass. So here are the problems I have with this movie. I'm gonna start with the big one. It's this stupid aspect ratio thing. Now, I'm gonna explain it as well. The movie starts with a disclaimer because it's in a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is almost square. So 35mm cameras, this is what they shoot. This is what used to be on TV. It's just a square format. The reason it's the case is because that is also the format of IMAX film cells. It's this big square because IMAX screens are big and square. It is a great format to film in if you're going to be watching the movie on an IMAX screen. This movie is essentially a made-for-TV movie. It's made for a streaming service. It's never going to see a theater, at least not for mass audiences. You're going to be watching it on your TV, which is not a square, and it makes no sense. It is the most pretentious thing. When filmmakers do it, say Wes Anderson does it, all of his cinematography is square. It's perfect. The movie The Lighthouse is about two men trapped on a small island and a lighthouse is claustrophobic. That aspect ratio adds to the claustrophobia of that movie. But if you're shooting this big sweeping epic with superheroes and essentially gods and all sorts of stuff, that taller aspect ratio makes no sense. You want it wide, and it essentially just gives more headroom to all of the actors. It's so stupid, I can't believe they did it. Fortunately, you do sort of become blind to it after a while, but it's a ridiculous decision. Again, Zack Snyder, apparently he also had the idea to do the whole movie in black and white, which just, dude, get over yourself. But to continue on that note, there's so many scenes in this movie that are so long that don't do much. I think there's 3 scenes of Lois Lane being sad. One would have been enough, and they're all incredibly long with odd music choices, which is another Zack Snyder thing. There's too much of it. It ends up sort of like being hard to keep track of things because it's 4 hours. One way to view this would have been to cut it into 4 one-hour segments, kind of like a series. Not sure that would have worked for the story, but still, it's more of that type of thing. In fact, the line between TV and movies just becomes even more and more blurred. This one is largely responsible for the next step in sort of blurring that line, which I'm honestly okay with. And it was ultimately, even though it was overlong, I'm kind of glad that if they're going to release it this way, directly on HBO Max, just do the full thing. Give me everything. Do the full 4 hours, whatever you want, Zack Snyder. Just do it. We'll watch it. It just kind of makes the movie not really rewatchable because it is so incredibly long, and it easily could have been trimmed down to like 3 hours and still had all the best scenes and all the best, story and character development. And there's this whole thing at the end of the movie that is definitely tacked on. There's a shot towards the end where you see all of them sort of standing in a line. That is the end of the movie. And for all the talk about Zack Snyder's original vision, I don't know why all this stuff's tacked in. I guess he thought they were going to do so much more with it, and that's what he wanted, how he wanted to sort of like show you what's coming next, but this is basically the end, and it's just sort of this cool thing. So I'm kind of jazzed about it. I really did not expect to like it much. I thought you weren't going to be able to accomplish too much with this director's cut, but it accomplished way more than I thought it would have. However, at the end of the day, you're still polishing a turd, and this turd got polished way more than I thought it was going to be able to, like way more, but you still do end up with shit on your hands at the end of the day, and this is not a movie I think I would have really enjoyed had it been the original one. I still would have felt like it was overlong and everything, but with the state of things, with streaming, and it's very interesting that a director like him could bring something like this to life, and it's much more successful in terms of improving on the original product than I thought possible, which I'm excited about. So that's my thoughts on the Justice League Snyder Cut. If you have not signed up for HBO Max, there's a lot of great stuff going on over there. I do videos that tell you about 10 to 20 movies on HBO Max, oftentimes hidden gems. So if you're new to the channel, definitely click that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you get notified when videos like that come out. But I will keep making reviews like this as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this Snyder Cut review, and you will see me on the next one.